Hi, this is Yusuf Kunji, and we're talking about the parts of the skull today and the anatomical features of the bone. I'm going to start with the anterior bone of the skull, the anterior view of the skull. Up here we have the frontal bone, which doesn't have a whole ton of features from this view. You can see these two little holes above the eyes; those are the supraorbital foramen. And back in this, you have the parietal bone. Below it, you can see a little bit of the sphenoid bone. And then further down on the side is the temporal bone. Then we have the bones of the face. We have the zygomatic bone and the maxilla. And down here, the lower jaw is the mandible. In the mandible, we can see the mental foramen. There are these two, or foramina. There are these two small holes in the bottom. And we can also see inside the nasal cavity, I suppose. This upper little nub, I suppose, is the middle nasal concha, and that's a part of the ethmoid bone. And then below it, we have the inferior nasal concha. On the sides of it are the infraorbital foramen, and those are named due to their position below the eye socket. There's a lot of stuff in the eye socket. We'll come back to that later. We have a bit of a better view of it. And that's about it from this view. So now we'll go to the lateral view of the right side of the skull. And this is a good one to see a lot of the cranial bones. Here we have the parietal bone over here, and then this is, you can see the frontal bone, and in the back is the occipital bone. Here's the temporal bone, and here's the sphenoid bone. And you can also see a lot of the bones of the face. You can see in this eye socket, you can see the ethmoid bones, this lighter one further back, and the lacrimal bones right here. Here's the nasal bone sticking out. You can see some foramen. Here we have, again, the infraorbital foramen, and down here again is the mental foramen. It's the maxilla bone. We can also see some of the processes. We have the coronoid process, is this piece right here of the mandible, and then back here where the mandible meets the temporal bone is the mandibular condyle. We can also see the mastoid process, which is this little bump down here, and the external acoustic meatus, which is here, and that's where your ears, the ear canal goes into the skull. And also there's this little styloid process, this little small sharpish nub down there. And so now on to the inferior view of the skull. So you can see lots of stuff. So we'll start in the back with the occipital bone, which is this bone right here. You can see this big hole is the foramen magnum, and then you can also see this. There's a small little nub in the back of the skull here. You can feel it with your hand if you feel in the back of your skull. And that is the external occipital protuberance. Moving forward, you can see here on the skull are the occipital condyle, and then further down there's these two small holes on the sides of the foramen magnum, and those are the jugular foramen. And in life, those would hold, the jugular artery would go through there, and the arteries and the jugular arteries and veins. And then, so moving on, here we see the temporal bones on the sides here. They're here and here. And you can see the mastoid process again as a little bump here. Also, you can see some nice foramen. Here's the stylomastoid foramen right below the mastoid process, one of those on each side again. You can also see the external auditory meatus from this view. See it clearly as a hole, pretty large hole here. Again, that's where the ear canal enters the skull. Also, you can see the mandibular fossa, which would be where the mandible meets the temporal bone. Also, you can see the foramen lacerum. There's these little lacerated-looking foramen through here. Below them, we have the sphenoid bone, and you can see here we have, on both sides, we have these foramen. Here's the foramen ovale. It looks like an oval, hence the name. And here's the foramen spinosum. Here we can see a little piece of the vomer bone. It's tough to see from any other view. It's this little piece right here. And we can further down, we see the zygomatic bone. You can see these pieces right here. There's one there and one there. And this piece here is called the zygomatic arch, because where the zygomatic bone arches out from the rest of the skull. Into the front part of the skull, we can see here we have this bone here is the palatine bone, and the two holes on it are the greater palatine foramen. We can also see the maxilla bone, which is this piece right here. And this piece of the maxilla bone is actually called the palatine process, because it leads back into the palatine bone. It's not actually part of the palatine bone. And we can also see this incisive foramen going right through here by your incisor teeth. Next we'll go to this is a superior view of the cranial floor. So again in the back here is the occipital bone and the foramen magnum again. You can also, from this view, you can see these little ones right on the sides of the foramen magnum. They're small foramina, and they're the foramen. They are not foramina. They're the hypoglossal canals. You can also again see the jugular foramen, where the arteries and veins go. From this view, we can see the internal acoustic meatus, which is here, and that's further in from the interior view, where the ear canal reaches into the skull. You can also see, moving further down, we reach the parietal bones on the sides here. There's not much of a view of them. There's also the temporal bones here on the sides, so little triangle-shaped bones. And those are the bones where the internal acoustic meatus goes into the skull. And moving down onto the sphenoid bone, which is this bone here. The sphenoid bone, it looks from this view like a butterfly somewhat. It has two wings. There's the lesser wing, which is down here. It's closer to the front of, it's up here, closer to the front of the skull, and then there's the greater wing below here going this way. You can see several foramen. There's the foramen rotundum, which is right here, this small one. You can also again see the foramen ovale and this foramen spinosum, these two right here. And also there's this term called the sella trichica, that's this structure right here. It's called that as, apparently when they were naming this, they thought it looked like a saddle from Turkish horses, so that's why they called it that. And then moving on, we have the frontal bone here, and there's the optic foramen in here, and this is where the optic nerve goes into the skull from the eye socket. That's right in here. And also in the frontal bone, there's some pieces of the ethmoid bone. That's right here. There's the cibriform plate, and then the medial line going through it's raised. It's called the crista galli, and those are both part of the ethmoid bone. And in that, you can see a lot of little holes, and those are the olfactory foramina, and that's where the little neurons from your nose conduct your sense of smell. We'll now move on to our last view. It's going to be another anterior view, but this one's just going to be of the eye socket. So it gives you just a better view of all the parts going on. And there again, you can see this supraorbital foramen, which is part of the frontal bone up top here. You can see the nasal bone on the side, which is the top of your nose. Then you can see the lacrimal bone, which is right here, and that's your tear. It's like right on the inside of your eye. And then there's a little lacrimal foramen, which is tough to see from this view, but that's how your tears go out of your eye and they end up in your nose. You can also see the ethmoid bone a bit further back there, and the sphenoid bone, which makes up this piece up there. Inside you have the orbital fissure, which is this long one, and then the optic foramen, which is here, and that goes into the skull. You can also down here see the zygomatic bone and the maxilla, below here, with the infraorbital foramen. And that's all. Thanks, and have a good day.